Goldie. We both work here.
Yeah, I would love for you guys to actually take a moment and introduce yourselves. Either, let us know kind of what your cycling background is, why you're taking the class, if you have, a bikepacking trip coming up, or you're just interested in it. Just let us know a little bit about you. You want to start?
I'm from Austin here. I travel for a living. Go to a lot of places. I'm a recreational bike rider.
Nice.
All I've done was Town Lake.
Yeah.
I've got a mountain bike with street tires on it, so I don't really get anything real serious like getting off the road or anything like that. But I want to do a trip, like I was saying, down the Rhine River in Germany. I want to go at least from like Koblenz to Mainz, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And I want to spend a few nights on the road.
Okay.
So obviously I need to know how to pack for that. So.
Actually,
Yeah, we will, for sure. We should be able to answer those questions.
That's my main interest.
Okay.
Well, I started gravel grinding like 2 years ago. So I did my first bikepacking, but I talked to you and another gentleman.
Maybe Andy.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I didn't have all the cool stuff, but I did the bike rack and the panniers and all that good stuff. But I rode from it was the Holiday Ramble, but I missed that, so I did it on my own. Gainesville, Texas, over to Eisenhower State Park and Canton, and came back. So
Okay.
that was my first, but I want to keep doing that.
Yeah, and you just did it solo on your own?
I did.
Okay, welcome, you
It was
guys.
awesome. Yeah, it was fun.
And any other big trips planned or just one?
Not right now, just
Okay.
kind of putting everything.
Okay.
no seats, sir.
Yeah. Hey, those of you that just came in, welcome. We are just kind of sharing a little bit about why we chose to come to bikepacking. Either you have a trip coming up or you're just interested in it, maybe a little bit about your cycling background. Can I put you on the
My
spot?
turn?
Can I put you on the
Welcome.
spot?
Yeah, here you are.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I don't own a car, and I just
Nice.
bike and been biking for about 40 years, and but never did any bike packing.
Okay.
And getting ready to buy some folding bikes to go to Germany with and do Frankovia region.
Okay,
So just curious about,
sure. Pack it up then.
yeah.
Okay,
Nice.
sounds awesome.
Hi, I'm Don Schwieters, I'm from Austin. I've been mountain bike racing for the last 5 years and got the itch to do some bike packing, and so I'm doing the Tour Divide.
Woohoo!
Oh, wow.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, that's a good place to start. Yeah.
Really?
Impressive.
I should, I was asked to do that for a magazine.
Oh, yeah.
I've been kicking around.
Alright.
So
Yeah.
I'm getting geared up for that.
Okay.
Oh my God, yeah.
You might have more
I've
info to share. I don't
I've never
know.
bike packed before, so.
Okay. Excellent.
Well, we'll have a total Q&A session at the end,
Yes,
so
definitely.
yeah.
We'll share.
Write it down, save it for last.
Okay,
I'm Jackie, I'm from Austin. Susan's my neighbor, and teaches an awesome class.
I was like,
I actually messaged you and asked you about hiking boots, but you probably didn't.
sorry.
Because I know you wouldn't have just ignored my message. I'm into a little bit of everything, and so I just came to meet people that are into that kind of thing and just see if this is something I might want to add to this.
Nice. I know you do a lot of volunteer work with Austin Cycling Association and Jackie's Bicycle Sport Shop, and you're a triathlete. Good one. Alright, next. Yeah.
My name's Tim. I'm a roadie, really. So,
We'll talk.
So it's alright. Yeah. We'll fix that. I'm just kidding.
See the light.
Yeah.
I'm just wanting to see if any of this is applicable to doing, like distance touring
Yeah.
as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll talk about both. I mean, we just happen to have, the mountain bike stuff going on, but we'll come back to you since you just walked in the door. We'll start over here. Yeah.
My name's Jason, been living in Austin for about 5 years now, and I'm generally a road cyclist. I've been commuting for the past 8 months or so, and I've been thinking about getting a bike for travel purposes and doing sojourn rides and fuel centuries and whatnot. So I was thinking about doing this to help travel and camp at the same time for the longer rides.
Okay.
My name's Patty. That's actually my roommate. He got me into cycling about a year ago.
Excellent.
So,
Good roommate.
been learning, yeah, we've done a little bit of like park camping and stuff and kind of seeing what the next steps are.
Okay,
All right.
excellent.
James from Cedar Park. Decades ago, I used to backpack, carrying water 75, 80 pounds. So looking for more efficient way to do it. I've been riding mountain bike on improved trails the last couple of years.
Nice, okay, cool.
And over here?
I'm Neil. I ride every day. Pretty long stuff. Pretty long time.
Yeah. Any bike packing plans or?
Yeah, I don't like pounding on my feet and ankles and stuff.
Yeah.
I ride rather than walk or drive.
Yeah. Okay.
What about you, sir?
In the back?
What's that?
We're just kind of sharing why we decided to take this class, or what your cycling background is, or.
I've been cycling like since I was 18, so never done bike any kind of touring or anything. So
Okay.
really kind of interested in that.
Alright, awesome. We have a slideshow presentation that we're gonna go through, and then hopefully we'll have a lot of time at the end for just a Q&A to answer questions. Feel free to stop us along the way and ask questions, and we will get started. Oh, actually, let's introduce ourselves.
Oh.
I'm Susan Sloan. I'm an REI outdoor school instructor here. In kind of my previous life, I was a professional photographer, so I brought that in. I also teach classes in travel photography, and I teach our GoPro classes. I also used to race mountain bikes, don't really do that anymore. Just recently kind of rediscovered the mountain bike, and of course have been loving it. So I teach our kids like how to ride a bike classes, and some of the beginner mountain bike classes. So those are my things: photography, mountain biking. Glad you guys are here.
And I am Mike McNulty. I work in the bike shop here. Sometimes I'm on the floor a lot too. Long history of biking in general. I grew up riding BMX in the suburbs of Orlando for 15 years, and then graduated mountain bikes just like everybody else who quits BMX and starts riding. So like Susan said, any questions, feel free to stop me, but we will go ahead and get the show rolling. So what is bike packing? It's kind of a loosely tossed around phrase, and it is kind of a nebulous definition too. Bike packing includes and does not include like road touring, gravel, single track, really like kind of heavy duty off-road, really whatever you wanted to. Generally speaking though, if you look up bike packing on the internet, it's going to give you more off-road oriented options and off-road oriented setups. And that's something we're going to talk a lot about tonight. The focus is going to be more or less on off-road, but we're definitely going to throw in a lot of touring aspects because there's, of course, a lot of overlap between the two. Because bike packing is so new. So to kind of start off, the first question you ask is, what bike do I need to bike pack? Like what do I have? Will it work for currently? Do I have to drop $2,000 on a new bike? And that's not necessarily the case. There is a wide spectrum of bikes you can utilize. Susan and I both have what are known as like hardtail, 29ers. One type is 29ers, the wheel size. Hardtail means it doesn't have, it's not a dual suspension, it doesn't have a shock in the rear, but they have shocks up front. So these you'll see are more or less, or the more common rigs, or the more common setup. There is sort of a bike packing style that's coming out more and more. You see more and more where the frames are made of steel, because steel is a much more forgiving material to ride for long periods of time. Steel with maybe a front shock or sometimes even rigid. Bigger tires, but not necessarily. There is some fat bike touring that's possible, but has anyone heard of like 27.5 plus tires, for example?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's been such a wide array of wheel sizes that have been experimented with in the past few years. I'm hopeful that the industry is going to settle down on maybe one or two choices for mountain bikes soon and really just kind of call it a day for at least another decade, but we'll see about that. You can use almost any bike to bike pack though. You can, if you have like a 26-incher like steel like Rockhopper from 1998, if you're smart about it, if it's in good shape, it'll probably work. So don't be intimidated by the idea of like, oh, I gotta buy a whole new bike to bike pack and all this gear. There's actually a lot of ways to really start experimenting with it and collecting the gear that you need. We're gonna go over trip planning, like all these questions. What do you want to do? What are you gonna need? Prepping your ride, outdoor gear choices. This is all something we're gonna get to within the slideshow. So with that being said, I'm gonna skip to the next part.
Or the me?
I think so, yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so there's different types of trips, and it sounds like you guys are all kind of interested in different types of trips. The first one would be kind of a minimalist style credit card touring. Basically, you're going to carry a minimal amount of gear on you, and as you go along, you're going to use money, use cash, and you're going to stop at convenience stores and other places to get your food. You're going to stop and pay for lodging, and you're probably not camping because, again, you're carrying a minimal amount of gear.
There's no shame in this.
There's no shame in this.
Really nice.
It's a way to do it, and it would probably be a really, fun way to ride. You're not weighed down by your gear and worried about all of that. Self-supported touring is really more, what Mike and I did. We had all of our gear with us, our tent, our food, our stove, everything. We were in a place where had we forgotten something, we're just kind of out of luck. There was nowhere to resupply, those kinds of things. So, and it sounds like a few of you are kind of interested in doing some solo, possibly self-supported trips. Vehicle supported sounds kind of, like what it is. If you've ever heard of a SAG vehicle, it's like support and gear. And they're gonna carry all of your food most likely. They're gonna carry your tent or sleeping bag or, and take care of you. So you're gonna ride during the day, and at some point your SAG vehicle is gonna stop and give you food and, set up your lodging. So definitely another, again, no shame, like that's a great way to go, see the world for sure. And then organized tours too. There's so many different companies. I mean, there's several local companies that have started organizing, bikepacking trips. Again, it's gonna be, probably you can choose, how supported it is at that point. Either they're gonna offer like a SAG vehicle just for like mechanicals or emergencies, or they're gonna offer, full service. I'm gonna carry all your gear and I'm gonna carry all your food and feed you. So just lots of different options as far as what you're doing. We were in the middle of nowhere, hiking up big hills. Yeah, so this is, so we just got back from Big Bend Ranch State Park, where there's, I think our trip ended up being right around 90 miles over really like 3.5 days. And we'll definitely talk about that more. I would highly recommend that trip to anyone. But definitely there was some climbing and some
Hike bike. Look at that phrase tossed around a lot.
Right.
Bike bag.
Okay, so.
The first question you should ask yourself, who are you riding with?
Yeah, just something to keep in mind. We've been riding together for a while, so we knew, you kind of know each other's limits. But if you're planning a trip with a partner or a friend or a riding buddy, you definitely need to speak to those things. What are your backgrounds? What are your goals? Are you racing? Are you taking your time? Are you both okay with, either having a support vehicle, or would both of you prefer to be self-supported, or, all of those things need to be thought about.
Me stand them for 3 days, 4 days, 2 weeks, Yeah. So with that being said, there are a few trips mentioned. So for the Continental Divide, for example, like you said, Don, what sort of resources have you been utilizing to sort of look up, how to do it, basically?
I've been working primarily with people that have done
Okay, that's a fantastic way to start, yeah.
it. And bike shops that actually are building bikes and equipment just for the
Nice, okay, cool. That's fantastic, fantastic way to do it, lucky you. So, these are the questions too you kind of want to ask yourself, when you're planning a trip. So the Continental Divide, I haven't done it, but I've done a little bit of reading about it, for example. It's if anybody doesn't know what it is, it's a route that pretty much goes through the Rockies, more or less all off-road, Jeep tracks, some single track, I think, kind of depending on which spurs you take. It's long, it's arduous, it's like 3,000 miles, definitely a challenge. And, you have to sort of do your research, find your resources, how are you going to do it, what maps you're going to use, what support do you have along the way, what towns are you going to stop at. If you don't want to do something that nuts, there are plenty of routes out there like that, for sure. That's something we're going to talk about a little bit more later. Gravel grinders or gravel paths or somewhat off-road, somewhat on-road sort of stuff. You can string anything you want together. Activity level, I think, is a really important question to ask yourself. Are you pushing it? Are you trying to crush like some sort of record? Like if you look at some of the bikepacking websites, for example, bikepacking.com, bikepacking.net, it was a little intimidating for me at first because I was reading these blog posts from these people who were trying to set records, basically. There was my first bikepacking trip was in Arizona on something called the Coconino Loop. I only did half the loop because it was my first trip. It was a 300-mile loop. But then I was reading these blogs, these guys who were, trying to crush this loop in like 36 hours. I was like, this is going to take me 5 days if I do the whole thing. So you don't have to push it too hard if you really don't want to. And then road and terrain selections, that's another good thing to say. Like something like the Continental Divide is more about endurance, from what I understand, than it is about technical single track. You're not hucking yourself off boulders for 3,000 miles, but you are riding, maybe unmaintained Jeep road, a lot of rocky sections. There are plenty of routes out there if you do your research that can either tone the skill level necessary down for sure, or ramp it up a little bit if you really want to. We'll talk about the Arizona Trail in a little bit here. And then, of course, sightseeing. I mean, part of the whole reason you do it is because you stumble upon these like grand vistas that just completely, they may be fantastic life moments. You remember them just before you die or something. Like it's really, really beautiful opportunities. So.
Is that during the ride?
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
You
If you're
almost
lucky.
die during the ride?
The top of the hill to get to the Grand Vista. That happened to us in Big Bend for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to continue to talk about trip planning because if you want to have a successful trip,
Takes a lot of planning.
all of this planning needs to happen. Especially when you're talking about self-supported trips. The more remote you are, the more important this planning becomes because you can actually, and we're going to talk about GPS and sat phones. The more remote you are, the more you need to have all of this stuff thought out. So things to consider: is it a loop, point to point? I mean, I won't read all of these, but think about mileage. We'll talk about that a little later, but I way overestimated the amount of mileage that we would be doing, mostly because I just didn't, I'm like, but I'm so fast on my little Epic, and, or my little Stumpy. But, discounting that my bike now weighs 50 pounds, and I'm just not used to that. If you're doing something that involves, like more bike touring, think about traffic and road conditions, there's a whole other set of things. Is there construction? Things that you need to think about. And then of course, like, are you camping? Are you staying in like lodges? Are you, staying in hotels? Timing. Is it gonna be freezing when you're going through? I mean, all that's gonna affect the clothing choices that you make. Is it gonna be hot? So timing of year, wind, weather, all of those things need to be thought about. Several of you mentioned international travel. International travel, of course, has its whole other set of things to consider. Getting your bike, boxed up and shipped, or even a rent-a-bike, those kinds of things. Cultural, like, is it okay for a single woman to be, bikepacking through, certain areas? Any unique hazards that your area might have. Again, back to that mileage. Don't overestimate how quickly you're going to go with
Especially off-road.
Especially off-road. Making sure you have time for rest and relaxation. I mean, it's a lot. It's hard on your body to just get up in the morning and ride, and make sure you have time. I mean, we brought, this was my concession. We brought like a pack of cards. I mean, it's nice at the end of the day to just sit and do something other than think about your gear or food or whatever. Making sure you put in ample practice and training time. Again, this is gonna come up later for us. I really wanted to do like a quick kind of overnight, like, let's just ride to McKinney Falls and test out all our gear and make sure we didn't forget anything, and it didn't happen. Luckily, like, we still did okay, but I would highly recommend, making sure you're getting lots of practice in, ride your bike when it's fully, whatever setup you have, if it's a trailer, if it's panniers, if it's, something like this, make sure you put in some miles before your big trip with your setup. I was lucky too, I was able to borrow a lot of equipment and kind of test it out. I mean, that would be huge. Somebody was like talking to friends that have already done it, they've already vetted out their gear, that what worked for them may or may not work for you and your bike. So definitely things to consider there. Borrowing is huge. And then again, like, just keep planning. Look at websites. We have a whole list of websites at the end that we recommend. Look at guidebooks, travel books, especially for those international travelers. Maps, go to your local shops, talk to people here at REI. I'm also a huge fan of Sport Shop and other places like that. So definitely there's people that you can go talk to, find people that have done these trips. And talk to them. I mean, anybody that's gone and done these trips would probably talk your ear off and love it, so find them and use them. Oh, look, more trip planning. Again, like, I cannot.
This side of nowhere.
I know.
Yeah.
So this is the ride that we did. If you're familiar with IMBA, the International Mountain Bike Association, they've gone and designated certain trails throughout, the U.S. Epic trails. So the actual Epic Trail is this that you can kind of see, and it's about 62 miles. And Big Bend Ridge State Park is literally like across the street from the national park that people are much more familiar with. This is significantly more rugged and significantly more remote, even than Big Bend, which is already really rugged and remote. So think about that. We added in this section called the Solitario. And if you're into geology, you can geek out about the Solitario all day.
We got halfway down the road to nowhere and took the long way out.
Yeah, there's something actually called the Road to Nowhere that is not. But I mean, so this was something that was in a book. And again, like, being able to like find resources. So this was put out by the, Texas State Park System. And I was actually lucky enough to meet Phil, Bundy Phillips, Dan Shaw, and Karen Hoffman Blizzard, and chat with them, and I was able to discuss with them, like, what are your favorite camping spots, and like, what are your must-haves, and all of those things, again, made for a significantly more enjoyable trip. And so again, like, planned out, day one, day two, and we modified this a little bit, but just having those resources, I cannot emphasize enough. If you want to have a successful trip, do all of your planning way prior. These are all campsites.
They're your campsites.
They're good campsites.
I guess water is a big one.
Oh yeah, we've got math. I mean, for this trip especially, or any sort of self-supported trip, I mean, if you're credit card touring and you're in an urban environment, you can stop at, a 7-Eleven every 20 miles and refill, but out somewhere here, or, possibly international travel, those kinds of things, having to think about your water source. Definitely in the desert, water was a huge part of our planning.
Now for the fun part. So, outfitting your bike. And this is, I think what.
Gas tank.
Yeah.
I know.
It's kind of what they call it right there.
I'm missing my.
And the jerry can. I brought
Did
one
you
of
bring
them,
the jerry
please.
can?
Yeah. So, this is the fun part that really kind of got me into bike packing. All the gear. I'm kind of a dork about gear. I love it. This is where the jerry can is supposed to go, by the way. That's on there.
And
There's
then
there's
if
that
you,
jerry can.
I mean, especially if you're familiar with like triathlon, I mean, your gas tank
Yeah.
is basically like your
This
little
thing.
bento box that sits up front.
Yeah.
So if you have like a little bento box
So
or
not
something.
real gas tank,
No.
not like cheating.
No. So think about, snacks, nutrition gas.
So generally when people think about touring too, they think about more of a road-oriented bike, maybe front and rear panniers, bags sticking out the side, like maybe a handlebar bag or something right in front, kind of like holding a map or something. Because of the nature of the beast with bike packing, you're doing obviously more mountain biking, more off-road stuff, more technical trail. Even if you're trying to avoid the technical trail, there's going to be parts where having a front and rear pannier bag system is just not going to work out. Pannier bags they hold more stuff, which means that they tend to be a little bit heavier. They can affect the handling of the bikes as much, or so much so that it might not be something that you notice on the road, but if you're trying to ride a front and rear panniered bike off-road, it's not going to be fun. You're going to be bashing the bags and everything, and just a lot of abrasion going on. So, over the past 10 years or so, there's been a lot of really good designs that have come out for outfitting a mountain bike with bags that'll hold all of your stuff. You got to think, well, what am I taking? And you're taking all your camping equipment, all your food, blah, blah, blah. The most iconic probably is the frame bag. Frame bags are awesome, and they're also can be kind of tricky too, because pretty much every bike triangle right here, every main triangle has a different shape, a different size, a different geometry. If you do your legwork, you'll find that there are a lot of companies out there, such as the guy that did Susan's custom frame bag, that will fit or design a frame bag for your bike. There are also a lot of mass-produced ones available that'll generally fit, you know, I guess for lack of a better term, more common front triangle sizes. This bag we actually happen to have as soon as I started working here, and it happened to fit my bike, so I was able to just get a frame bag and not have to make a custom or anything. The oversized seat bag in the rear is probably the second most important piece of equipment you'll have for actually taking stuff. That's where, you know, maybe like I put my tent, I put my clothes in there, a lot of lighter, fluffier stuff that's high volume. You can put whatever you want in there. I think Susan ended up putting a lot of our cooking gear in there because we had a few disasters. And then the handlebar roll bags. So this is probably the trickiest one out of all of them. Handlebar roll bags, you'll see a lot of setup, different setups. REI in particular carries a company called Revelate, which I guess at this point might be one of the more common known bike bag makers out there, at least for bike packing. So she had a setup that's probably a little bit more old school, if you can apply that term in terms of bike packing, with more of a traditional stuff sack like this.
Talk about what happened here.
Yeah, we'll get to this section. But she had a harness that went with it too. So the way it kind of worked, if you can, you know, wrap your head around it, you put the stuff sack, you know, in the harness, you attach it to the bike, loops it around. You might have to mess with it, as we ended up doing a fair bit those first few miles. That's why a shakedown run comes really in handy. But if you're smart about it, as you can see there, you can actually fit quite a lot up front. Very important for it not to be too heavy though. Your bike handling is already affected, you're already riding more technical trails. So once again, I try to emphasize putting higher volume, lower weight stuff in there, like I think I put my sleeping bag and my sleeping bag and sleeping pad in there. So it wasn't too heavy in the end. And snacks and quick access stuff. There's like handlebar roll bags and stuff you can get. So anything else in there? Salsa makes something kind of cool called the engine cage, but we had a disaster with it. That broke, and that water bottle just fell off. So that's, I mean, that could happen anywhere. That's the other thing, is stuff will probably break at some point. You know, that's why being prepared, that's why trip planning is so important.
Yeah, more vetting of your gear. It'll keep coming up.
How many flats did you have?
Zero!
None.
We'll talk about that too. I mean,
Yeah.
again, zero mechanicals, zero flats.
We got lucky. We got really lucky.
I don't know. I think it's a lot of good planning and good,
Yeah.
you know,
Tires all the
good
time, I don't know what they're doing.
good bike maintenance.
Next.
Did we skip?
No.
The seat bag,
Yeah.
does that affect the handling at all? Because
Not-
it always just seems like it's so awkward to have that.
The
It's a-
seat bag I thought was fine. Definitely the front handlebar roll for me was tough. And like our ride had a lot of like do you do wash kind of things?
Right.
And you know, so when you're just the front handlebars, I never noticed.
If
it
you're
on
riding
the seat bag.
suspension, it's really good to vet it, because when you hit that rock bottom, when you hit that bottom or something, you can pressure shock.
Yeah.
You're buzzing your bag every time. So, well-designed, to answer your question too a little bit more, a well-designed seat bag will tighten up and compress really well. So it's not going to move around a lot.
Doesn't move. Yeah, it didn't.
Plus,
move.
like I said, if you pack lighter gear in it rather than close to heavy
Yeah.
gear, it's not probably gonna shift and.
Yeah, and all of your gear, all of these bags, I mean, as you move along, as you ride more, you're going to fiddle with them like every 20 miles. You
Yeah,
like tighten the
it
strap
takes your
here, like,
gear.
yeah. But eventually you'll find, like, it took me really this trip to really dial in my setup.
Yeah.
Next slide.
So yeah, prepping your ride. This is a nice relaxation slide. This is just like taking a nap in the desert because it's really hot. I mean, again, like think about your weather, those kinds of things. There's no shade. So, you know, being able to find some shade was huge. So back to bikes.
Anybody have any more questions about what kind of bikes? I think we kind of talked
We'll
about
get
this a
on
little bit at
bikes.
the beginning.
I have a quick one.
Yeah.
You mentioned the weight on the handlebar.
Yeah.
Don't be too heavy.
what kind of numbers are we talking? Is 5 pounds heavy?
5 to 10 pounds.
10 pounds heavy?
Yeah, I mean, you kinda gotta, if it ends up, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just gonna say, like, I would have made different choices about what went in the seat bag versus what went in the front bag,
Yeah.
and just really tried my hardest to make the handlebars as light as possible. You know, put the weight in the back. I mean, even in, and we're gonna talk about like descending and things like that. I mean, descending, you know, we'll talk about it, but
Does everyone here know what a fat bike is too, by the way?
What do you
Like
call
I mentioned
them?
this earlier. Huh?
What do you call them?
Fat bikes.
fat bike.
Yeah.
Fat
Yeah, like I think it's 3 to 4 inches of tire, 3 to 4 inches wide. There's something that you, probably like 10 years ago or so, they started popping up, a few companies started making them. Mostly for snow riding, really. Those large volume, low pressure
Sand.
tires. Huh?
Good on sand.
And sand too, yeah, anything really soft. Large volume, low pressure tires you get amazing traction with, you basically kind of float over it. You do make some sacrifices, I mean you get a lot of like, you know, bob and up and down, because you're really just bouncing on a big balloon the whole time. And it might be kind of overkill for more of like a single track sort of style. And I guess both these bikes demonstrate sort of a spectrum of bike packing bike, because the Novara Safari on the right too is really like Novara's REI's house brand of bikes. We have a touring bike, but then we also have the Safari, which is kind of a weird bike. It's kind of like it's a touring bike with strange mountain bike-esque handlebars, the rigid fork, but like fat, kind of mountain bike-esque tires. It's meant to be our bike packing bike, but then it comes with a rear rack. I mean, this is the kind of thing you could utilize, or would be more appropriate for maintained Jeep road or off-road, double track, gravel grinders especially, that kind of thing. So if that's more your speed and more your style, then by far that's a fantastic bike. Yeah. I think that's good too.
Oh, no, I think shoes.
Yeah, shoes with me.
Okay, good.
So, a note about shoes, who here rides clipless or anything like that? Yeah. So you know what a pain it is to kind of walk around in a pair of clipless shoes. I do it all the time, I mean I commute every single day, I'm surprised I'm not wearing my clipless shoes right now. But for a bike packing trip, there's pros and there's cons to it. So the nice thing about it obviously is the traditional benefits. You know, you're getting a more circular pedal stroke, you're getting a little bit better power transfer, more efficient, you're wasting less energy than you would with like a platform and shoe setup. But with bike packing especially, you're getting off your bike a lot. You're pushing your bike up hills, technical hills sometimes. Like, it's not always the funnest to kind of feel your feet, maybe slipping and sliding a little bit out there while you're pushing your bike up a hill. More so, and I think even better, even in the future too, we're going to see more companies offer like bike packing specific clipless shoes. There are already a few models out there.
That looks like.
Oh, they're crazy. In fact, there's some crossover too to the winter riding I just mentioned. I think it's Shimano just released, and there's a few other companies that released kind of like a boot, like a full-on waterproof alpine boot that'll have maybe Vibram soles on the bottom and then a recess for an SPD cleat or something like that. So more and more, better. I have a flat.
There's that flag.
Yeah, right. Better bike packing equipment is coming out like almost every month. I keep up with it pretty well, so it's getting better and better. I mean, because really the entire activity itself, I mean, about 10 years old.
Alright, yeah, this was a funny one for me too, because I think one of the first questions I had asked Mike was,
Sorry.
oh, you're right. Like, what shoes are you bringing for camp, right? I'm used to like, you know, backpacking, like usually you bring like a pair of shoes for, you know, you take off your hiking boots. And space, unfortunately, is at such a premium. He was like, are you kidding? Like, I'm just gonna walk around in my bike shoes. And I was like, really? And it ended up being no big deal. I mean, definitely whatever shoes you bring, you know, make sure they're fairly comfortable. I'm used to wearing these. I will say I had cleats. Like, I had 4 cleats. By the end of the trip, I had like half a cleat. You know, they just, you know, that's unfortunately, there was a significant amount of hike-a-bike and the cleats, I don't really know if they, depending on the terrain, the cleats could be helpful for helping you get up, you know, like soft embankments again when you're pushing a 50-pound bike, you know, any help that you can get as far as traction so you're not slipping on, you know, slipping on your cliffs, but yeah, shoes.
Shoes. That's me as well. I guess we've already gone over a lot of this. Just kind of comparing the different, you know, the pros and cons between frame-oriented bags and more hardware-oriented bags, rack bags.
What do you usually put in your frame bag?
Very good question. Water for this trip.
Yeah.
We had a 4-liter dromedary, which is just a big reservoir, just hanging out in there, and that saved our butts a couple times. It was great. You need that kind of water storage out there.
There's
Yeah.
not, like, I had like a huge list of things that were supposed to go in my frame bag, and I quickly discovered that my frame bag is just not that big.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of space, so mine ended up pretty much being most of our food. Like all of the food ended up in my frame bag, and his was pretty much full of water.
Yeah.
Did you guys carry a Camelback also?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, so we both, yeah, and there's like a whole slide on Camelbacks, I mean, we both had.
Actually, next slide. That's
Oh,
a
is it?
fantastic
Look at this.
transition.
Woo, look, hydration. So yeah, we both had, 100-ounce, 3-liter bladders that we carried.
Susan had an extra growler of water too.
And then, yeah, I had the anything cage with an extra growler of water that was kind of like super emergency water. And I think we might talk about that. The anything cage is really awesome. If you get one of those like bike packing specific bikes like Surly is making, they'll actually come with, I don't know what you call those things. I'm not a bike person. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Brace-ons?
Yes.
Thank you. Whatever, attachments to actually attach it. We used kind of like a clamp system to attach it on. But unfortunately what happened is, a metal growler not like just completely, strapped in. Mountain biking, what happened is it just sat there and like pounded on the bottom of the anything cage. And I actually had an opportunity to talk to the Salsa rep. And he warrantied it and said, it's going to happen, and actually recommended he prefers the plastic version. I brought the aluminum version. So I don't know, something I would still think about in the future. I would highly recommend carrying this. It was nice. I mean, for me, I had my camera. My camera was in here, and then here, sunscreen was huge. Just anything like that you need, a little first aid kit, emergency blanket. So even if we like walked away from the bikes to go do something, I still had snacks and food and water, and emergency stuff. I will say I had some trouble with my kick, with my Osprey. They don't fit well. They're not like, they're kind of like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. There's not a whole lot of adjustment that you can do. And it did, like, after 4 days, it rubbed my back pretty bad. I think after like day 3, I was just like, whatever, it is what it is. But something to think about, go ahead and try on a couple different ones and try and get one that fits you really well.
This may not apply to the
Yeah.
desert, but did you guys carry chlorine tablets so you could do the water?
We didn't carry chlorine, but we absolutely carried a filter.
Okay.
I figure, there's like filtration, and then there's like.
There's a slide for that.
There is? Okay,
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Let's
No,
move
it's
on.
good. You guys have great questions. We
They
already
are.
have
They're
slides.
they're good questions. So back to, did you have any flats? No, we both run tubeless. And tubeless again in the desert is probably the only way to go as you're continuing to go over thorns and things like that.
Let me interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Everyone know what we meant?
Oh, yeah.
My tubeless.
No. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Okay. So it's more common in mountain biking. Probably a system that's been around for almost 10 years or so. Someone came up with a genius idea of, well, initially there were just tubeless tires. Tires with no tubes. It was exactly what it sounded like. But the tires themselves had to be really thick, really heavy, really rugged, just because if you got one hole in it, you had a flat, you had to get a new tire basically. A genius named Stan came up with the idea of putting liquid latex in it. Very similar to the green slime stuff you'll find at pretty much any bike shop. However, that green slime stuff has a very high viscosity, it's very slow to fill, it'll eventually get to your flat, but your wheel might be flat by the time it happens. Latex, and now there's a couple of different brands like Stan's and Orange Seal and I can't remember the other one, Cafe Latex. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a lower viscosity liquid that is constantly rotating around the inside of your tire. Anytime you get any sort of flat, glass, thorns, particularly in the desert, what have you, or what happened just now, like some random hole occurring in my tire, you saw that I was able to spin my tire around and it stopped. That's because the latex can fill up any hole basically smaller than 1/4 of an inch. So.
I will say, I run tubeless on my road bike.
Yes.
And there's not enough air in that tire that.
For it to fill up quickly enough.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
road bikes, the jury's still out, whether or not it's really appropriate.
Not for
but
me.
Yeah.
I went back to tubes.
You went back. I mean, so of course,
A lot of the triathletes are going to tubeless.
Really?
They have that discussion on the site all the time.
Yeah.
that they're
Well, it's great while they work. I mean, it's like riding on a
Exactly.
Tempur-Pedic mattress.
yeah. We, of course, we carried, so what happens is, if you do puncture it and it can't be sealed, you just put a tube in it. And then now all of a sudden, you have a regular tire again. Or, if you carry you can carry the sealant, you might be able to seal it back up. We did not carry a spare tire. We carried, and I think that comes up later, we carried, tools to actually just repair the tire that we had.
Tire boots, stuff like that.
Trying to think of other things. So definitely, some sort of small pump. I'm a huge fan of CO2. I'm way too lazy if I have a flat to sit there and deal with a pump.
And they're also, sorry to interrupt again, but they're also pretty necessary for tubeless setups.
Right.
That initial burst of air.
Is
To
huge
seal it.
to
Yeah.
get everything sealed. CO2 pretty cheap, and super lightweight. You're gonna have some sort of like chuck that your CO2 cartridge attaches to, and really quickly within a second or seconds, you can have, and especially a mountain bike tire inflated. So we had spare tubes. Some stands, and then some CO2 cartridges. I actually don't think we brought a shock pump.
No.
Again, like weight is pretty much,
At a premium.
at a premium. Not that shock, just again, like trip planning. Make sure your shocks are doing well. Make sure everything is aired up before you go. Maybe if we were doing a longer trip, it might have been necessary, but.
Oh, lights. I love talking about lights. Lights are probably my favorite thing to sell when I'm down on the floor. Because the technology has gotten so much better in the past, once again, 10 years. The past 10 years have been great for bikes. So back in the day, if you wanted to ride off-road at night, and this applies to bike packing because sometimes you find yourself in a sticky situation where you have to get to where you're going, but the sun is down. Now, if you don't have a decent light source, it's going to be really difficult to navigate. It might even be pretty dangerous. Light technology has gotten so good the past few years that most decent lights, if you pay around between 80 to 150 bucks for a front light, a good front light, you're getting one that's going to be USB rechargeable. It's going to be at least 700 to 1,000 lumens, if not a little bit more, if you get the right one. And it will basically be enough light to light up that trail in front of you. Because you're out in the middle of nowhere, obviously there's no ambient light except for maybe the moon and the stars. So a little bit of light like that goes a long, long way. I've heard of bike packers who do like to start early or ride into the night, like they'll use simple like kind of camp headlights and stuff like that. I don't really think a lot of those lights are bright enough to be safe, but they make it work. They're more worried about weight and stuff. I strongly recommend a high output, high lumen light, USB rechargeable preferably. And also, remember to make sure your battery's charged. Don't go out there with a dead light, With that being said, a headlight too is a fantastic backup and also works really well for around camp too. So I bring a front light like the one you see on the left, and then I also, actually that pretty much is my setup right there. There's 2 lights in the top for being prepared for any sort of night riding. Because the first time we did the Epic, it was a one-day ride. I mean, we really didn't think about how long it would take us, and we found ourselves riding back, after the sun had gone down. I'm like, there are coyotes out here, we need to.
But with no lights?
We had lights,
Oh,
because
okay.
I was
We had
like,
lights,
just
for
in
sure.
case, we need to bring these, and then I think one of our batteries started dying or something.
It was fine,
Yeah.
sorry. Trip planning. Lights. So this trip, we didn't have we weren't planning on doing any night riding at all, but we both definitely still had lights just in case.
Yeah, I brought a fancy flashlight for like the campsite and stuff.
Yeah, especially,
Did you bring an extender, battery extender?
Yes, an extra battery, like a USB battery, we did.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and it came in handy.
But a lot of the general cell phone battery ones probably are not enough milliamps to really charge like a higher powered bike light. So bear that in mind too.
I mean, definitely check your settings too. I mean, that's my problem. I have a great, really bright light, but the problem is that brightest setting, it just doesn't last that long. So something to think about.
Excuse me, what about for mounting when you've got this big old roll thing? Does it seem like you could even use on your handle?
I mean, I have like my Garmin and his, the Garmin's are still mounted, and it was, I mean, it would have been fine to have it, because the handlebar roll really, it mounts like just below the handlebars to about here. So I mean, yeah, the Garmin mount stayed on, and a bike light would have fit on there just fine too.
And also,
You're a huge fan of the helmet.
yeah, I
too.
have a helmet mount that'll work, my light will work on both, my handlebar and my helmet. So, in fact, if you're riding off-road at night, I generally recommend a helmet mount, because that way the light is where you're looking as opposed to just always forward on your bike. Because sometimes you're turning, but you're looking one way, so it can be a little disorienting when the trail's super dark. GPS is fun.
GPS, I think we're both going to talk about GPS. I have the little Garmin 520, there's like the Garmin Edge, there's like a specific bike touring Garmin. When the first time when we rode the one-day Epic, we did have the
GPX file.
The GPX file to follow along. And it was nice because we weren't as familiar with the trail, so when you're tired, it's nice to just like follow the little line and know that you're going the right way. For this trip, we actually didn't have it loaded up, so we relied on the map.
Pass it around.
What? Oh yeah, you guys want to play with mine?
No, the map.
Oh,
The map.
oh yeah, you should look at the map. But GPS is huge, especially for urban settings, things like that. But you should definitely always make sure you have a paper map, because of course, I don't know, it was.
I think we ended up looking at the map more than we did the GPS.
We looked at the map way more than the GPS, plus the map didn't die and the GPS did. So, thankfully we have, a backup battery, and you're able to plug it in and continue on your way. But, I don't know, you talk about GPS.
Well, there's also the first bullet point up there, which is always have a paper map and compass. I'd never do a trip like this without a compass. You may be able to rely on your old Boy Scout skills to tell which way the algae's growing or whatever, but it doesn't always work when you're in the desert.
Yeah.
So, GPS, and there are, like the eTrex, I guess it's 30?
Yeah.
I guess the eTrex 30, but the eTrex 20, the one below that, is a pretty common one that a lot of bike packers use. You can upload maps. Now, let me backtrack a little bit. I mean, does anyone have any sort of general confusion about GPS? Like how to use it, or where to get it, or what types of units are
So this is
available?
more for bike packing. What if you have a Garmin? I mean.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the Garmin, I think it's just called the Edge, right?
That's the Garmin, well, that's the Edge 1000 or
Yes,
800.
that's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
your
yeah.
Garmin
I see what
uses.
you're talking. Yes,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
That's
so
what you're saying, yeah.
Garmin, for example, Garmin
just
makes a
variants.
wide variety of GPS. I mean, they make GPSs for golf, they make
Right.
GPSs for sailing, aviation, they make GPSs for bikes and hiking, which we sell both at REI. The 800, the 1000, that is going to be more your on-road touring. I think you can do I'm pretty sure you can do off-road, like base relief maps and everything on there. Very similar to what the Edge 30 or Edge 20 is doing there, where you can tell what the elevation is going to be, what the topography is going to be like, maybe even landmarks and navigational orientation, things like that. So,
And
or
you
you can do a little black breadcrumb
Yeah,
trail like
and you
that.
should be able to preload courses. If you find it online, I mean, they're GPX files, and those GPX files can be loaded onto, whatever GPS system you buy. And it is, it's comforting to be able to see where you're at. Sometimes it'll tell you, how far you have to go to the end, those kinds of things.
It was actually really helpful on that first time we did the Epic trip, because I knew that at least we were on the route, because I could look down at the little arrow and we were
Yeah.
following it.
Following you.
How did the GPSs hold up with the jarring of the mountain?
Fine, no problem.
The mounts that they make specifically for the Edge, for example, I mean, they don't bounce out. They're really well designed
I
mounts.
do have a little, this wraps around the handlebars just in case I
Yeah.
crash or do something and it goes flying, at least it stays connected to the bike, which is nice.
Oh, you want to talk about the
What's the advantage of this
Yeah.
kind of GPS over the GPS in your phone?
Your phone.
Your phone's gonna die.
Yeah. And your phone, I mean, it gets GPS signal, but a lot of times it
It's
is
using the tower.
routed through the towers too. So
Yeah.
there are ways. I mean, I noticed something we just started selling. I think this week.
It's
It's called
like
like
brand
Gotenna
new.
or something.
Yeah.
And I think it's supposed to be able to let phones talk to each other, but not really give you a straight GPS signal from a satellite.
You can send text messages and things like that. I think it's almost more of a safety thing.
Yeah. And that leads us to emergency GPS.
Yeah, so and back to the phones, both of our phones pretty much stayed in airplane mode the whole time. I mean, there's nothing out there. There's no cell service. There's nothing. So phones just stay in airplane mode, and then you don't have to worry. It's one less thing that you have to worry about keeping charged. I mean, I think both of our phones almost lasted the whole trip without needing to be charged. You know, keeping this charged, and then we had an emergency sat phone that we had that actually stayed beautifully charged. We had a Delorme, or Delorme, I'm not actually sure how you say that.
I think it's
Delorme?
Delorme, actually.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But it was really nice for people back home. It has an emergency button, you know, that you can push, and it's going to send out a signal that's, you know, to the closest people in your area, and then you can start texting and saying, you know, I got bit by a rattlesnake, or, you know, I just crashed off my bike, whatever. And get you the help that you need. Spot is another one, if you've ever heard of like spot trackers. Again, if you're in an urban environment where somebody's around or your phone is fine, none of that is probably necessary, but as soon as you get off-road, it was really, really comforting to have that. And know that really quickly, you know, someone's not gonna have to pedal 20 miles worried, especially because there's only two of us, you know, worried about their friend. So yeah, the Delorme was huge, and Delorme actually lets you do a month-by-month subscription. Like once you buy the unit, you still have to subscribe to the actual service, you know, that will send out the messages and do all of that. Spot only lets you do a year. For that, I prefer the other.
Delorme's like $20 a month, and Spot's like $100 for the year. So
yeah. It just kind of depends on what you're doing. You know, if you were going on a 4-month or 6-month, you know, touring type thing, you know, you could definitely look at them both. If you know you're going to need it for a small amount of time, maybe, you know, a week here, a week here, you know, I would maybe consider something that you could do a month-by-month subscription and just get it whenever. But
Do you recommend if you're doing solo trips?
Yes.
Absolutely. And I would keep it, I mean, I had it clipped like right here. I mean, if I went down with my bike basically, like it would have been really easy for me to still like send the help signal.
To crawl to it.
Yeah, to just crawl to it, send an SOS. So yeah, definitely, you know, for solo trips, you just don't want to be worried about, you know, does my phone have reception?
Did you carry both types of GPS then?
Not this time. Well, we had our Garmin Edges, but we really didn't use the map functions. Mine doesn't even really do any mapping, and Susan's is very minimal. We also knew the trail already too this time around.
Yeah, and I didn't use this for anything but an emergency. I mean, it just sat there, and it was, if something happens, I have the ability to quickly send an SOS and get help. We even, like, everything was pre-programmed in, you know, friends and family, and so, you know, it'd be really quick, again, to...
But I guess I'm asking,
Yeah.
would you have to, I mean, obviously that's a good idea, but if you did want the map function, you have to have the other one too?
Yeah, because they're two separate GPS
they really are
functions.
two separate things.
That just does mapping, and then that just does emergency services.
Okay.
Like, you can't follow your route on the emergency GPS, so
Yeah.
pick and choose, I suppose.
But recommended both. Again, like in an urban environment, probably not that important. The farther out you get, definitely.
Little note about trailers here. Anyone familiar with bike trailers? It's kind of a common option. It's still a fantastic option for road touring. Bob made an off-road model, and I'm pretty sure they still make it, but they're hit or miss. It kind of really depends on what kind of traveling you're doing. You know, if you're doing just double track, smooth double track, it's fine. I had a buddy who actually did the Great Divide using a trailer, and he hated it. He said it was like the worst part of the trip. The trip was awesome, but his trailer was terrible. So just a little note about that. Huh?
Never mind.
I don't know. Yeah, I think he thought he was
I think he
cooler than he
wasn't.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Bob?
Huh?
That's a Bob?
Bob.
that's the ball.
Bob, yeah. They make we carry their strollers, for
Yeah.
example, but they've been making bike trailers forever for touring.
You know, we're going to talk about some like rails to trails type thing. If you're doing something like that that's paved or like pretty, you know, well maintained crushed granite, something like that could be amazing. You can carry quite a lot of gear. Would have been ridiculous on the trip that we were on, ridiculous and useless. So I mean, again, trip planning, you know, what's going to make the most sense.
You'd be surprised when you have to lug that stuff around, how you decide how little you really need.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I don't need deodorant. I did bring that. Okay, so you know we've already touched on this for sure. This is weird.
we've already touched on this, packing your bike. I definitely had a lot of issues with, the front, my handlebar roll being too heavy. So just back to this whole, heavy items in the back. Heavy items in your frame bag are good too, but the problem with the frame bag is there's just not a whole lot of space in there.
It's great for water.
It's great for water, which is heavy, by the way. So yeah, heavy items at the back, lightweight, bulky stuff up front. Yeah. Ooh, clothes. Clothes, I think I did really well. I don't know. You can speak to yourself. These were my clothes for the 4 days, and this again, this goes back to trip planning. What?
I love that they all fit.
Oh, I know. Compression socks are your friend for sure. I was pretty good about constantly checking the weather, and it changed. But everything fit in here. I had, a puffy jacket for camp at night. I had a long sleeve hooded shirt for camp at night. I brought 2 kits, one for the first 2 days basically, and one for the second 2 days. It's the desert, it wasn't, that big of a deal. One of the things that was a last minute purchase for me, I'm kind of a strange mountain biker in that I even wear a kit, most mountain bikers wear shorts and things. But I like the kit, but I did buy shorts at the last second, and they were a lifesaver because at the end of the day in camp, you take all this, hot, sweaty stuff off, and then you had a pair of shorts. It was hot when we were there, kind of unexpectedly, I think unseasonably hot. 90s in the desert with that rock and the just constant heat and no shade. 90s is warm. So I had all of this amazing kind of emergency, maybe worthy in the morning, knee warmers, I had arm warmers, I had a buff, more arm warmers. I had a vest, that fit in there, and then I had a winter hat. The hat I did wear at night, maybe around the camp, the campsites at night, it would get chilly. And in the morning, it would be chilly when you first woke up, but the second that sun really came out, you were taking all of this stuff off and just changing, into your kit or whatever you're gonna wear. Thermals. Women at the end of the day, just take off the sports bra, take off everything, and it feels really good. Just put on your camp wear. But clothes was perfect. I think you even washed a kit.
Yeah, we were able to stop at the ranger station on the second day.
In Saucedo.
Yeah, and that was beautiful. That was such a good shower.
Yeah.
I washed my first kit with it too, so.
So look, all those clothes, fit in the little compression sack. Compression sack, definitely your friend. But I played with this quite a bit too. I was like, surely I need another shirt, or surely I need this, and then it's just nope. Because there's no room to carry it.
And you're also riding the whole time too. You're not stopping to change your socks.
I did have 3 pairs of socks. I did change my socks every day. That was something, yeah. And of course, cycling cap, I think I just pretty well destroyed a cycling cap and wore it for 4 days.
How did you dry that kit?
In the sun.
Desert? Yeah.
We hung out at the ranger station probably for a good hour and a half.
Rest and relaxation,
and
right?
The sun. It was still a little wet, but it was fine. I just put it back out when we got to camp. So next slide.
There's 0 humidity.
Yeah, it dried quick.
Oh yeah.
Not always the case though. So this is not related to clothes really, but it's probably one of my more favorite parts of the gear situation, because come from a mechanical background, I was responsible for any snafus that we might encounter. So we both actually had multi-tools, tubes, everything we talked about earlier. But we also brought sort of this extra emergency stuff. It's amazing how far Gorilla Tape, zip ties, and quick links will go. Gorilla Tape, actually.
Yeah, I know.
Saved this. Her sleeping pad was in here. So if the tire would have rubbed through her sleeping pad, she would have had a really cold few nights and a very uncomfortable, the ground was very rocky there. Zip ties too. In fact, even though I haven't really used a zip tie yet on a bike packing trip, You will. I will. It will happen. Zip ties are probably one of the greatest inventions of mankind by far, especially if you work with bikes. So they can be used to kind of put stuff back together, tie stuff tight, especially on a bike packing trip. Keep loose gear tight. Really, I mean, route cables in case they come loose or something like that. Be creative. The opportunities are endless.
What is Gorilla Tape?
Gorilla Tape is a very, very nice,
Fancy
high-quality
duct
duct
tape.
tape.
Oh, okay.
It's even stickier and it's even stronger, and that's what
Yeah,
Susan
so
does.
I had like maybe like 2 feet or so of Gorilla Tape actually just wrapped around my seat post. And when this started to happen, it was just like, okay, you know, what am I gonna do? And I just kind of created a patch. This is the bag that my sleeping pad was in. So like my sleeping pad bag is out here, and then I just Gorilla Taped it like crazy so that it could withstand tire rub, you know, when we hit. And this is with my fork locked out.
Yeah.
We need suspension. So yeah, something to think about. You know, the other fun thing, again, and something to think about trip planning, if you're going solo, you know, I had like my own little personal bike maintenance session. You know, I practiced fixing my chain, like, you know, what if something happens to Mike and then I ride away and my chain breaks, you know? So I practiced, you know, popping out links and fixing my chain. You know, I know how to fix a tire if it goes flat. So if you're going on some sort of solo trip, definitely things you need to think about are bike maintenance, making sure you know some basic stuff and how to fix it. Definitely could save you.
Oh, we have bike maintenance classes too.
We do.
Experience. We'll get to that.
Look at that.
Yeah. I think we went backwards.
There you go.
It's one of our pictures too. It's one of our campsites.
I know, it's hard to see.
Yeah. Shelter. Oh, we
yeah,
haven't gotten to shelter yet. So what do you, I mean, what comes to mind when you think of like what you're gonna sleep in at night?
10.
Tents. Yeah. No, very good choice actually.
The REI Camp Dome 4.
The lodge, of course.
The Kingdom 6 or the lodge. I mean, all legitimate, yeah.
One cool thing that really helped with this trip is Susan and I were both able to get what's called the REI Employee Challenge Grant. It's really just kind of a little bonus where they allow us to get like $300 retail worth of some sort of equipment, REI brand. So Susan got my favorite tent, the Cordon 2.
I got a quarter, yeah.
Fantastic backpacking tent, really light, kind of bulky, but the comfort and the ease of setup more than make up for it. It fits in there. I mean, it's great. That and some poles in
Is
your
it
set.
a 2-person tent?
It actually is a 2-person tent. You better like the person you're sleeping with.
Yeah.
It was really nice, you know, just at night. Yeah.
My old roommate Sarah did a lot of bike touring, not bike packing, but more bike touring. But she'd always say, you know, regardless of where she was at night, as soon as she set up that tent and got in it, she was safe.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
it's a real safe place. So a tent can do a lot for you mentally. You know, it gives you a space. It gives you some place to unfurl all your stuff and kind of go through your clothes, change, relax, sleep, take a nap, whatever. So I am a big fan of the tent. I don't mind the extra weight. There are some bike packers who are a little bit more hardcore than I am. Same thing with some tours out there. They'll go straight up bivy sack. Does everyone know what a bivy sack is? Yeah, it's basically a sleeping bag for your sleeping bag. It's a water resistant, sometimes with some sort of small pole for a little bit of structure, but you are just enclosed in there like a mummy. So for the less claustrophobic of you out there, that might be a solution. Other than that, I don't really like them because you're in the bivy sack, but all your stuff isn't. And it's cramped, it's small, you're on the ground. Like if it rains hard, it's gonna be really uncomfortable and hot and muggy. And so
Well, and back to tent choice too, like REI does make, you know, smaller, lighter weight backpacking tents, but I didn't want something that had to be sticked out. I mean, and that's something to think about. I wanted something that was self-supported, you know, pull, set it up, kind of set it and forget it. And then I really loved a feature that this tent had too, and that you could use the fly and the footprint and create a shade shelter, which again, like we're in the desert, shade is at a premium. I mean, there was an afternoon, we were both kind of done. We got to our campsite, there was no shade shelter, nothing. So, you know, pop that up, relax for a couple hours, just get out of the beating sun and kind of change your attitude. So yeah, shelter's important.
sleeping too, for that matter. I sell a lot of sleeping bags, obviously, and everyone has, they're kind of confusing and intimidating at first. You're not really sure, you know, how much a good sleeping bag is going to cost, or what a good temperature range is, or I just need a bag for Texas, or I just need a bag because I'm going hiking. It's like, well, how cold is it going to be when you're hiking? So that was something we encountered, especially in the desert. The nights are really cold. They can get down, I think it got down into the 50s or so, with the highs in the 90s, but during the early spring, it can get as low as like the 30s sometimes. So plan accordingly for that. A good sleeping bag and sleeping pad combination will pack down small enough to fit into something like a handlebar roll.
Yeah, so I mean for me, actually, just to give you an idea, so this is my sleeping bag in here, and then this is my sleeping pad. This was stuffed in here, this, and my tent actually all fits in that compression sack. And then this was my front handlebar roll. Like this is what sat, you know, right up here. Probably actually in hindsight, maybe not the best decision. But I think by about day 3 we had it dialed in pretty well to where everything worked up here. And again, like compression sacks are your friends. You know, I got the sleeping bag in a compression sack, and then this, and it all fits in here just fine.
So for the kitchen too, we had a pretty simple cooking setup as well, and I think you'll find this to be a relatively common setup. The stove I used was the MSR Pocket Rocket, which is kind of a classic. It works on isobutane propane, those little canisters you can get. Those are really handy, they're convenient, but they're not refillable. Once they're done, they're done. Susan, she didn't bring it with us on the trip, but I think she saw it on the back of her car. The MSR Whisper Light is like an alcohol stove, or it can run on gasoline, white gas, what have you. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that as far as cooking and everything goes, there's a lot of different gear out there, but the smaller the better, the simpler the better. So we did do the freeze-dried food option. It was actually my first time really utilizing freeze-dried food while camping, and there's nothing better than a hot meal at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like it really, it helps you psychologically, physically.
Too.
Yeah, she brought oatmeal, or we brought oatmeal for breakfast and everything. Coffee. Oh, I should have brought my coffee mug. I lost this I had this coffee mug, right? So, little French press coffee mug. Make your own press. You know, it's like 2 cups of coffee.
See, this is huge. I'm going to totally interrupt and say there's creature comforts, right? If you're bikepacking, if you're backpacking, whatever, there's going to be little creature comforts that are going to kind of make or break your trip. For him, and I gave him a hard time about it, French press coffee. I'm like, seriously? I brought Starbucks instant Vias
Gross.
because they take up this much space. And but creature comforts, I mean, there is going to be that thing that someone else might say that's ridiculous, you can't pack that. But if it's going to, you know, kind of make or break your trip, you know, pack it. It could really make a huge difference. So French press coffee.
Oh yeah, so I lost this coffee mug too. Like, the state park is the size of Rhode Island too, so we get back to the campsite, and I look down, the coffee mug is gone. No, it's gone. Where did that leave it? We'd stopped at this cave with these really cool, like 2,000-year-old hand paintings, and basically these hikers found it, and brought it back to the ranger, or some motorcycle guys like brought it back to the ranger station. It was just cool to find my coffee mug. You know, I could have been lost forever. All my coffee was in it. Next slide, let's move it along.
All right,
And I guess this is just kind of like the last minute, do I have everything? And you will find yourself doing this. No good trip is complete without this, actually. Shakedown. Putting everything on the table, staring at it for a really long time, and making sure that it's all there. You know, packing your bike, unpacking it, riding it around your front yard, which still won't even really do it justice, but it's fun. It gets fun after a while. It's a little stressful, but it's part of the whole experience, you know? Like, you really learn what you can live and live without when you do stuff like this.
Really quickly, I'll touch on toiletries and of course, like bathroom tech stuff. Something to think about again. You know, depending on how urban you are, not that big of a deal, pop into the nearest convenience store and take care of business. If you're out rural, you know, things that you have to think about. Do you need to pack it in, pack it out? Can you dig a cat hole? Those kinds of things. Definitely something to consider along the way. And then toiletries, I mean, again, it kind of comes back to like creature comforts, but you know, toothbrush and toothpaste, you know, small towel, and pretty well good to go.
I brought my entire line of moisturizers. What's up, sir?
Can I add that second to zip ties, Ziploc bags are really useful.
Yes, in fact, we use them. Yeah.
baby wipes for that purpose.
Oh.
After you clean up, after going to that baby wipes. you can
Yeah.
do it all.
Hand sanitizer.
Totally. We had like a toilet kit that's like the trowel and your toilet paper, and you can even shove like a mini hand sanitizer like inside your TP. It's a little embarrassing to go to your friend and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna go for a hike. Can I borrow that shovel?" But and then like, you know, this is like the greatest desert bath in the entire world. You know, somehow just like wiping off your face and you know other stuff at the end of the night feels really good. So yeah, I mean that, a towel and a toothbrush, we were pretty well good to go. I'm gonna start busting through this.
Yeah.
We've kind of talked about this, you know, just space is at a premium, so anytime you can, you know, shove one more little thing, it's huge. You can actually utilize like this space. You know, I've seen people utilize this space here. We talked, obviously, you know, there would normally be a bag here, but you can have your jerry can here, you can have your gas tank here. Anywhere that you can, you know, add just that extra little thing helps. The Salsa Anything page was huge, you know, little less on his. I know, but being able to have that water was really helpful. It didn't break until like the third day, so I mean we still had water, that extra water. Okay, nutrition is huge. You know, we talked about the importance of having hot food at the end of the day. Something you need to think about when looking at these little packages is, like, you can even see right here it says 2.5 servings. So you would kind of think like, oh, we'll just share that. No way. So you really need to look at calories and think about, you've been out in the desert sweating, you know, pushing a 50-pound bike all day. You need to think about the amount of calories that you're burning and the amount of calories that you need to replace in order to get up in the morning. And if you actually start adding up the calories, this is like USDA type stuff, you know, like I'm on a diet and maintaining my weight, not, you know, I've been out in the desert all day. I mean, we could plow through one of those and probably have eaten more. So, you know, each of us had like one of these at night, usually. We even had, we had one extra one that we ended up eating like for lunch one day, because we were both just starving. Something that I thought about as far as snacks, like if you're a vegetarian, you're definitely gonna have a piece of veg. You know, kind of some different, you know, different ideas about what you need. I'm a huge fan of taco bars, beef jerky, things like that. Like just a nice mix of like protein and carbs and electrolytes.
Peanut butter.
Peanut butter is huge. These little Justin's peanut butter packets are so your friend. I will say, you can see, like, I packed, like, here's day 1 snacks, here's day 2 snacks, here's day 3. By day 3, I could not put a Bobo's bar. It just was not what I wanted. So you need to know what your stomach can handle and what you like to eat. You know, if you're riding all day, you know, what do you like to eat? But I would also say, like, throw some variety in there, because by day 3, day 4, month 2, you know, what you liked at the beginning may or may not be what you're liking at the end. Some extra stuff, you know, here's oatmeal, super easy. Electrolytes, of course, being out in the hot. I'm a huge fan of Sport Legs. Is anyone familiar with those? Sport Legs, you know, anything, it's just gonna help like flush out, you know, everything during the night, flush out all your lactate or whatever that you've built up, and just help in recovery. So in the morning you actually get up and want to ride your bike again.
So what is it? I don't know.
I'm
Magic,
pretty sure
little
it's
magic
little
pills.
magic pills.
Yeah, that's all
We sell them downstairs. Honestly, I think it's a lot of magnesium and probably a lot of like potassium and things like that.
Replacement electrolytes.
I
Yeah.
see.
So I'm a huge fan of Sport Legs. Salt Stick is another brand that we used on the One Day Epic that actually have caffeine in them, and you could feel the caffeine. You really could. I mean, you'd get like a 20-minute burst of like, I don't feel so bad, and then you realize like, oh, that's the caffeine.
That's the plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want caffeine, it has to be with the plus.
Yes, so there's just regular Salt Stick electrolytes, and then there's the plus with the caffeine. So nutrition, obviously important. I would say, you know, you kind of can't have too much. Water. Somebody brought up water.
Yeah, so we did bring up water. So water is something that, regardless of where you are, you obviously will encounter. That's me in the corner. We found a spring on the last day that was wonderful. It was just trickling out of this rock, and we were able to like filter the water out and drink it straight from the spring. It was very idealistic. That cistern wasn't nearly as idealistic, but it was still very welcome because that pumped out to kind of a newer cistern, and we were able to fill up, filter the water through. You know, this is all non-potable water though, so we brought a water filter, and to kind of harken back to what was said earlier about, I guess, sodium chloride tablets. There are many different ways of treating your water. You need to think about how it needs to be treated, where you're going. You know, the most physical filters, you know, whether or not they're carbon-based filters or filament-based filters, will filter out bacteria and protozoa, which are the main things that you're going to find in most natural spring water sources, you know. You're not really going to find much in the way of viruses. Viruses are more like urban or third world or developing countries. That usually requires either boiling or some sort of chemical treatment. So, fortunately enough, we were able to take, and I should have brought it with me, but a small Sawyer filter. It's basically, you have a dirty water bag, you fill up that dirty water bag, you screw this filter on top, you flip it over, and it really drains out, it filters out fast enough for you to drink out of.
It's gravity.
Exactly, it's a very simple gravity filter. So, that was a life set. In fact, I've had that Sawyer for a few years and used it on a few trips, and it's saved me quite a few times.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like treating versus, or filtering versus actually treating, I mean, again, like in the middle of the desert, you know, there's no viruses out here that I'm worried about. If I was in a more urban environment, I would absolutely do both processes. More water.
That dromedary, yeah, that doubled fantastically as a pillow, by the way. I'm a kind of a princess when I sleep, so I had like my little camp pillows. This isn't enough, and I came up with this idea in the middle of the night to stick that under, and I slept like a baby the rest of the time. I guess that's pretty much everything we just talked about. Now we can move to the next slide. Yeah.
Okay, again, like adjusting to the ride and back to this. You know, this made for a rough first day when all you hear is your tire going, you know, rubbing across your bag, and then realizing that your tent and your air mattress and all these things are in here. And I would really like to show up at campsite 1 and have those things be in one piece. So yeah, just adjusting to the ride, things to think about. Like you can actually see my little setup a little bit here. You can see the Garmin, you can see how it's attached with the poles and everything. But just things to think about, limiting your speed. We were very lucky, we had 0 mechanicals, and really, in a way, like 0 falls. I kind of like,
You fell.
okay, so on a downhill, this is, you know, limiting your speed and things. You know, on a downhill, what happens is, you know, the front of the bike is heavy, and it starts to get really difficult to scrub off speed. So I kind of just like sat down on a hill at one point.
Susan, I almost fell twice, but Susan didn't see it. Yeah.
So just things to think about, you know, it's going to take you longer to stop. Cornering is like a whole new beast. And then definitely I was like, I have never ridden in my granny gear so much. I'm not sure the bike saw, you know, the big ring through most of the trip. So definitely like a different style of riding than you're probably used to. Just think about limiting speed, watch your gearing, watch how you pack.
And on the flip side of that too, it's not like it isn't fun though, because occasionally you will hit that downhill where since your bike is loaded down like a locomotive, you're just flying the whole time too. So you're not suffering all the time, just a lot of the time.
It was really fun.
Yeah. This is a very important technical point. One thing to think about if you're riding a bike with suspension is to compensate for the extra weight. My fork, you know, like I had adjusted for my body weight, but then I ended up putting probably an extra 20 psi, 30 psi in the fork just to kind of keep it from moving once. I really kind of minimized my suspension, but with the extra weight, it helps scrub off that initial impact with a lot of the technical terrain while not having the bag buzz every time, for example. And also same thing with tire pressure too.
Yeah.
Traditionally speaking, mountain bikes, larger volume tires, it's
Tubeless.
popular, or tubeless, it's popular to run lower pressures. But once again, you have an extra 30 pounds on the bike, you gotta, you know, maybe jump up that pressure from 20 psi. I put about 30 psi. I might scrub off a little bit in the future, but that's what I tried this last trip. And then I don't know why that note's there about may have to order new coils, but just make sure your suspension's in full working order. The thing about suspension bikes, whether or not they're hardtails or dual suspension, is that it is a system, especially as the bikes get nicer, that requires a fair bit of maintenance. So if you haven't had any sort of shock overhaul, or even had a mechanic look at your pivot points, your shock, what have you, in more than a year, do that before going out, or else you'll be in the middle of the desert with a blown seal or some sort of blown valve, and there's going to be nothing you can do about it. So, we should probably try to get going, actually.
I know, we have like 5 minutes. Yeah, more stuff, just more trail riding tips. Comfort is key. We both actually just rode regular old flat bars the whole time, but you know, some of the new bikes have you know, drop bars, or we brought up some wherever they are. Oh, like bar ends, just things so you can get different positions on the bike, just to help with comfort. You know, you want to ride slightly more upright, or you know, stay in your flats, or maybe even be able to get into a more dropped position. Just options, things that you can do. All right, local resources. Okay, all sorts of cool, fun things that you can go do. National parks. Typically, you can't ride your bike in national parks on any of like the hiking type, you know, single track trails. But on dirt and gravel roads, you can go to town. So typically, a place that you might only be able to access with a 4-wheel drive vehicle, all of a sudden becomes an amazing playground to go bike packing. I love Big Bend National Park. And 2 of my favorite gravel roads would be the Old Ore Road and the Maverick Road, both of which, the Maverick Road, you could, you know, start basically in like Terlingua and, you know, bike pack and camp at Santa Elena Canyon. Pretty fun. Old Ore Road, there's several campsites along the way that you could camp in that, again, like, without a true 4-wheel drive vehicle, you're not going to be able to get to. So things to think about when you're looking at national parks, like don't discount them as being places you can't ride. State parks, of course, Big Bend Ranch. You know, McKinney Falls is right here. If you want to start, you know, getting into bike packing, you know, a big thing are kind of these like sub 24-hour trips. You know, leave after work on Friday, pack up your adventure bike, ride out to McKinney Falls, set up camp. You've done it.
Lake Georgetown's really good.
Yeah.
Lake Georgetown is an epic, you know, like the Goodwater Trail is an IMBA epic. Pedernales Falls, all those. There's also a ton of private mountain bike parks around. Bluff Creek, also known as Warda, Rocky Hill. You can actually turn that into like an 80-mile gravel grind and ride between the two. You can camp at Warda, you can camp at Rocky Hill. They have showers, they have bathrooms. And then, of course, there's some out-of-state, long-distance kind of, you know, put on the bucket list type trails that you can go do. The Arizona Trail, 800 miles. REI just put out a video that you should absolutely Google about a woman trying to break a time record on the Arizona Trail. Definitely go watch it. The Womble and the Washita in Arkansas. The Womble's also in the epic. Kokopelli Trail. There's a woman named Rebecca Rush. She's an adventure racer. She was just here in town. She broke the female record on the Kokopelli Trail. Oh, she's amazing. Do what? Yeah. And then, of course, there's things like the Great Divide and definitely just like bucket list type things. Do you have anything to add?
Oh, I've done a section of the Arizona Trail. It was part of that Coconino Loop, and it's about 800 miles, and it's really beautiful. I didn't do 800 miles, but one day I'll go back and finish the whole thing. Yeah.
Bucket list.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to, you know, enough of this mountain bike jazz. All of these trails, there's the Silver Comet Trail, the C&O Canal. I'm actually going to have to look at my notes on these. Silver Comet is 62 miles. It's the longest paved trail in the country. You can camp, you can stay in small towns. Definitely, you know, amazing bike touring opportunities. The C&O Canal is 185 miles. If you combine it with the Allegheny Trail, it's like 300. So again, like amazing opportunities. Virginia Creeper, I think, is the easiest one. It's 34, maybe a good place to start.
This is a really friendly name.
But yeah, the Virginia Creeper. We unfortunately don't really have anything like that around here. These are all, you know, up, but still good.
This can be a really good transition too, especially if you have like a touring setup already, or you really just kind of want to make the transition from, on-road riding to off-road touring, or maybe you just don't want, you want to tour but not be surrounded by cars the whole time too, which is kind of a big thing for me with road touring.
Caprock Canyon.
Where's that at?
It's up near Esteline. It's about it's
Is it
north of Abilene, way northwest of
Oh,
Abilene,
nice.
up towards Amarillo.
Okay,
They
near-
have that rail
near
trail up
Palo
there. Just
Duro?
Google Caprock Canyon
Okay.
Trail.
Nice.
It's some
And you
state
can camp?
parks there. You can camp the whole thing. It's like 60 miles.
Nice.
It's
There's
beautiful.
the San Juan hut system.
Mhm.
Yeah, so many hut-to-huts. Like when you get into like Colorado and Utah, and so many hut-to-huts. And again, like you can do it super self-supported. You can do it super organized. So many options.
And these are a few of our favorite websites. I look at bikepacking.com almost every day because they're actually really good about having these stories. They had a really good series of somebody bikepacking across, I want to say it was either Uganda or Rwanda. Really amazing adventures, all the interesting people they meet on these kind of trips. Spain, Mongolia, I mean, they really travel the world doing amazing, amazing stuff. I've actually never looked at Crazy Guy on a Bike, but
Yeah.
Adventure Cycling is a classic resource, specifically for more so on-road touring. They're the organization that helped establish a lot of the transcontinental routes. The more popular routes that you'll ride from east to west, Portland to Portland, those are Adventure Cycling routes. So definitely look them up because they have a lot of good resources for that kind of touring. They're a fantastic organization. Walleye Riding is another bikepacking website. They're
I
pretty
like that.
fun. And actually, I've never looked at Bunny Velo either.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's really nice.
Keep going. Definitely, if you're not a member, be a member.
Are you a member?
We have some upcoming other classes that definitely would help support this. Intro to mountain biking. Again, bike maintenance, always important. We actually have a gravel grinder class coming up. GoPro editing, travel photography, because of course you want to, make sure you memorize this whole adventure. And
Yeah,
now
yeah.
we're
Did y'all do any GoPro video on
We
this?
thought about it, but it would have been one more thing to by the time we got out there, it had totally slipped our minds, really.
Yeah, I was kind of sad about that, but it was also like, I had the camera and we had all this, and there was a lot of gear vetting that needed to happen, and that's a next trip.
Didn't make the cut.
Didn't make the cut.
So technically class goes till 8, so we don't want to keep you or anything, but feel free, if you have any questions, we're here for questions
You
now.
can
so.
come look at gear and
Yeah.
ask all kinds of questions. Do you have a question?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I just was curious about solar power. You guys started talking about
Very
everything
good question.
dying off. Did you try?
No, and I've heard a lot, the reason I haven't tried yet is I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about solar power, whether or not it really, in the desert it might do its course, but it takes 6 hours to charge a phone.
And it's not strong enough for like my camera batteries and those kinds of things. Thank you. Hey, before anybody leaves, make sure you fill out that little evaluation. It would be awesome. Thank you. And yeah, so solar, it's not strong enough to do like my camera batteries and those kinds of things. He did, I don't remember.
Oh,
the
I
name
have
of it.
actually I just have like something called, you probably heard it, Mophie, like a Mophie battery. It's really just a standalone lithium-ion battery.
Yeah.
A couple USB ports. It's like 2 full cell phone charges. I've also used it when I've used GPS devices. It actually saved us for mapping and stuff. It's a little bit heavy, but if you have some, gadgets you need to bring, then a backup like that is really important. That same company that does solar panels, Goal Zero, they've actually released a lot of pretty affordable cell phone batteries that'll at least be a couple charges or something. So I suggest looking into that.
Yeah, I know Don's doing the hub, internal hub kind of.
Yeah,
Yes.
Dynamo. Yeah.
Right.
That one, that is.
Yeah, that's.
So we can go through your gear, is that cool?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
take a
Come in
look.
here and look at anything. You can ask questions about how it was packed, or just play with the bikes.
Yeah. But otherwise, thank you all very much.
Yeah,
for coming
thank you
tonight.
guys so much.
Actually,
There's pens in the back, guys.
Oh.
Sorry. Yeah, no, that one.